This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It's episode 230 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're following Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera 86. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you like to listen to the show. But if you want to be a part of the chat, if you want to be a part of the conversation, you are doing that right here on YouTube. And you can also support the show on YouTube with super chats, super stickers, and super thanks, which are all available there. Appreciate everyone for being a part of the show. Shout out to the chat. We got 24 people in the room currently in here. Shout out Nelson Cruz, Duran Rivera, G Money Stacks. Happy birthday, my friend. Good to see you in here as well. John Rossi, good morning, my friend. Carlos Ortiz, Maureen. We got Frankie in the room. Guys, there's it's funny because there's really not that much to talk about, but I didn't come to you last week or last weekend. And I thought I'd come to you today. Obviously, since the last time I talked to you, the Mets traded the Jeff McNeil, and the Squirrel is not a part of the team anymore. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Not much really there to it outside of the Mets, and David Stearns continues to get rid of this core of the team. And I don't know how much you consider Jeff McNeil part of the core, but he was one of the homegrown Mets. 3 of them now gone. Him, Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, all gone out of this team. And we're kind of left wondering whether David Stearns has up his sleeve, what his plan is for this team moving forward. What we do know is that spring training is not too far away, right? Next month, February, we begin the spring training hunt for this team and how they're going to build this roster. I know I have the schedule right here for spring training. So the first game against the Miami Marlins is February 21st. That's not far away. And this team still has a lot of work that needs to be done. They have a lot of work that needs to be done. And I like how Carlos Ortiz puts this, the Squirrels trying to find his nuts in California. We're in California. Where are they? In Sacramento right now? I know they're at least just called the Athletics, not Oakland anymore. But, man, this has been just overall, probably one of the worst off seasons I can remember. Not just because the Mets have really just let everybody go. I mean, there's some players that I understood letting go. But just in general, for Major League Baseball, free agency is really boring. They really have to change the hot stove. It's not the hot stove. And I put here for a little bit of fun that it's the MLB Cold Stove. But there's not much going on right now. They're free agents. They're still available. Some of the big names are still out there, which we'll get into later. But there has not been that much signings going on. Outside of the 3 players this past week, or week and a half, 2 weeks, from the Far East. Those are the only guys that have gotten signed, and they had to, because their signing period was coming to a close, and they would have had to come back to the MPB. So Tatsuya Imai signed with the Houston Astros, 3 years, $54 million. His deal can go up to $63 million total, and he's got to opt out after each year. Mark Feinsand of MLB.com said the Mets were never serious in pursuing Imai, and they never believed that he was going to be an impact starter. Now, I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, the impact starter that came from the MPB was Yamamoto, and the Mets were willing to give 12 to 13 years, $350 million. They did not feel the same way about Imai. And they just didn't want him. And the same goes with the other two that signed as well. Akamoto signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays continue to improve their team, a team that was inches away from winning the World Series over the Los Angeles Dodgers. So he signs with the Toronto Blue Jays 4 years, $60 million. Murakami signed with the Chicago White Sox 2 years, $34 million. So the Mets really never had that much interest in these guys. Although we've seen them, they're looking into this guy. That's all we've been hearing this offseason. They're looking into this guy. Oh, they're showing interest into this side. And that's why I don't like to get into the rumors as much. Once these guys are signed, then we can get into talking about them. But all the rumors, it just means nothing right now. And for a team and a fan base that's looking for a little bit of hope right now, I just don't know what it is that they're going to do, as we are only weeks away from the start of spring training. Some of these guys are probably not going to be signed until 2-3 weeks into spring training. You also have to think about the WBC that's going on. The one thing that I do know about the signing of Imai to Houston is it's possible that Framber Valdez now is not going back. Although they said in one of the articles that I read at MLB.com that there is a possibility that they're still interested in bringing back Valdez. But is that a pitcher that the Mets should be interested in? Last season, 13-11, 3.66 ERA, had 187 strikeouts in 192 innings pitched. Had a good first half, really struggled the second half. He comes with a qualifying offer, which means if the Mets sign him, they're going to have to give up a draft pick. Same goes for a guy like Ranger Suarez. He's got a qualifying offer attached to him. That draft pick, do the Mets want to give up the draft pick here? He was 12-8 last season, 3.20 ERA, and had 151 strikeouts in 157 and a third innings pitched. The thing is, what is the direction of this team? One of the important parts that I took away from that Feinstein quote about they did not believe that Imai is an impact starter. Who is the impact starter? They're definitely looking for one. Who is it? Is it via trade? Is it one of these guys like a Valdez or a Suarez? They seem more like a 2 or 3 to me, more like a 2. Not a 1. We currently have a 2 that could turn into a 1, right? In Nolan McLean. You got a whole bunch of 3s, right? And 4s. David Peterson, Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga could possibly be a number 2 if he stays healthy. But you got Peterson, Senga, Manaya. And then you're talking about the kids at the end of the rotation in Brandon Sproat. I still think that Jonah Tong needs seasoning down in AAA. So we may not see him to start the season. But as we've known in the past, this Mets team takes on a lot of injuries. So there's just not been that much movement. And outside of those 3 players that signed, big free agents are still available. We talked about Valdez. We talked about Suarez. I mean, outside of those 2, now you're looking at more 3s, more 4s. Nick Martinez, Chris Bassett, Zach Gallen. The relief pitchers are mostly gone at this point. It's probably got to get something either via trade or you have to take a chance on a lesser name. I mean, let's go through some of the names here that are left when it comes to relief pitching. David Robertson is the best possible option left, 41 years old. You got Jacob Junis, Danny Colomé. Outside of Justin Will, I mean, there's not Luis Garcia. There's not much. Andrew Chafin. I'd take a chance on Sir Anthony Dominguez, honestly. Coming off of the World Series bound Toronto Blue Jays, I might take a chance on him. Not that many options. And then when you look at hitters, the Mets really need at least 2 hitters in that lineup. They found a way to replace the production offensively of what Brandon Nimmo gives you with Jorge Polanco. They'll never ultimately replace what Pete Alonso gives you. That's, they can try to get it close, but you're talking about signing guys like Kyle Tucker, who would help out the outfield and hit. Cody Bellinger, another one that helps out the outfield, hits, plays first base. Alex Bregman. Eugenio Suarez. He could bop. Bo Bichette, I don't know where he fits in the infield. Unless you're putting him at third and moving Beatty to first. Same thing with Bregman. Then you got, this JT Realmuto, he's like 35. They're not going to get him because they have Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens. I mean, the next in line, Harrison Bader. I mean, you want to get that far down the line? I don't think so. The Mets need an impact starter at the front end of the rotation. They need an outfielder or 2. They could use 2. I mean, unless they're going with Tyrone Taylor and hoping for the best. They probably could use a first baseman because Jorge Polanco just starting to, practice drills doesn't entice me much. But where do they go to find this? Is it free agency? Is it via trade? We're going to get into David Stearns' plan in just a few moments. But I want to get into some of you guys in the chat. We got 81 people in the room here. Got to get to some of the chat here. Frankie saying, time is running out for Stearns to make a big splash to turn this ship around. I 100% agree. I'm giving Stearns the benefit of the doubt, and we're getting to Stearns in just a few moments and why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here, at least now, at least until we get to spring training. Not much movement's going on, right, with a lot of free agents. So there's still time. But time is ticking. The clock is ticking, and time is running out here. Nelson Cruz saying, say hello to Baby Mets Part 2. That's probably what we're going to see a lot of, right? Francisco Alvarez, obviously a stalwart at catcher right now. Mark Vientos. We don't know what it is with Mark Vientos right now. He just hired Scott Boras to be his agent. Obviously, he's a part of this team. And to me, he's probably penciled in as the first baseman at this moment in time. Along with Jorge Polanco, they're probably going to split time there at first base. And maybe he'll get some time at third or mostly at DH. But I would assume you can't get rid of Mark Vientos' bat without replacing it. Because we've already lost, Brandon Nimmo. You lost Pete Alonso, who's the big one, and now Jeff McNeil. And to replace them with just the kids is a huge risk. He's putting all his chips on the table if he does that. But he did talk highly about Brett Beatty playing third. And Brett Beatty, I think, has earned his spot to at least start the season at third, just like Mark Vientos did last season. Carson Bench has been talked about a lot. Actually, he really mentioned Carson Bench a lot during the GM meetings. So we'll see if he goes into spring training and lights it up like Pete Alonso did in 2019 to earn his spot on the roster. They still need an outfielder. Even if Carson Bench is starting, they still need another outfielder. Carlos Ortiz saying, I think when Stearns went to Japan to scout these players, it was just to get some sake. Yeah, I don't know who he was scouting. But once they don't fit his price range and years, he doesn't want him. And it doesn't mean that when he went to go scout them, he liked what he saw. Maybe he didn't like what he saw. He scouted Yamamoto too, and they offered him $350. He just decided to sign with the Dodgers. Nelson Cruz saying Stearns using Uncle Stevie's money to take trips and try local cuisine. Hey man, give me that job. I'd take that job in a heartbeat. Duran Rivera saying, I think the Mets don't want to sign anyone until after the 15th of January when they can sign a Cien, could make a trade for need and pool money in the meantime. Does that, I don't know too much about the pool money. Does that affect the major league roster? I thought that is different from that. I need more education on that. I probably should know about this, but I am not high on what the international pool money is and how they can sign their free agents. But this is the guy I think they're signing away from the Yankees. And I just don't know how much that money affects the money that they're using in free agency. I thought that has to do with possibly them and the money. If they have to pay the luxury tax, they lose money from there. So I don't know. I got to look more into that. Nelson Cruz saying, am I a dreaming? Yeah, I mean, there are probably a lot of the Met fans that thought Imai was going to come here. We're probably dreaming a little bit. Peter saying, I don't think they want to spend. I don't know if it's they don't want to spend, right? They want to spend, but it's the price of the players is not to David Stearns' liking, unfortunately. And we're kind of stuck in this malaise right now. I'm pretty sure they want to, and they have to spend. They have to complete this roster. But if Cody Bellinger wants 7 years and over 200, 300 million, he's probably not going to be a Met right now. I think David Stearns is trying to wait this out, and it's probably not a strategy I like, because if there's a price that they don't like, then these guys are going to sign elsewhere. Stearns is going to wait some of these guys out through spring training. I definitely think so. Yeah, Peter, just like you said, I don't think they want to overpay. That's exactly it. That's exactly what they don't want to do. They don't want to overpay for these guys. But to get some of these guys to come to Queens, they have to overpay. Otherwise, they go to teams like the Yankees. The Mets haven't had the sustained success, and we've said this in past episodes of this podcast in past years, that the Mets needed to make themselves a destination. Because if they do that, maybe they don't have to overspend for certain players to come here. Why come to a team and that has been more of a losing organization when you can go across town to a team that goes to the playoffs every year for a little bit cheaper? Of course they're going to drive the prices up for the Mets. And we thought that the Mets had gotten out of that after making the postseason in 2024, that miracle run, signing Juan Soto. We thought things had changed. But then the team collapsed. And then we hear about all the stuff that happens behind the dugout, behind the clubhouse. Doesn't make it sound good to want to come here and be a Met, unfortunately. So the Mets have to overpay right now. And with David Stearns not wanting to overpay, that becomes a problem. Shout out to my guy Armand in the chat. Appreciate you. Appreciate you for being here. And look, let's get into here's a good comment from Mama. I believe teams and owners are freezing out the free agent market until the next month when spring training starts so they can get players on short-term deals, opt-out deals. And that's the type of deals that David Stearns likes. He likes that. And that's why he's waiting. Now, whether he executes and gets the players or they get taken by other teams, that's a different story. And we'll have time to analyze and complain and be upset and maybe let's complain more, say our frustrations. I don't want to call anyone complainers, but, let out our frustrations on why this team and why David Stearns couldn't get the job done this offseason. But still time. You got to think, too, some of this has to deal with some of these players wanting to play in the WBC, what's going to happen next year with the lockout. A lot of stuff to consider. Shout out to my guy Steel41. Greetings from Bangkok. Appreciate you, man, for watching the show all the way from right there. Wow. Now you know we've gotten somewhere. Jeff Cohen in the chat. Maybe Kyle Tucker is expecting a 10-year contract that is not coming his way. That's most of these players are expecting deals. Look at Pete Alonso last year, expecting a deal that wasn't going to happen to him. Obviously, his value went up this season after having a good year. Sometimes it's just not their year to make that crazy amount of money. But these players want security, especially with the lockout looming. Maureen saying, I think the direction of this team right now is falling into mediocrity unless they do something big soon. What would be the big move for you guys? And I put this out on X. What is the big move that the Mets need to make, or the moves the Mets need to make that'll make you feel comfortable heading into spring training? I know that I wouldn't feel ecstatic. I'm still not ecstatic of what is the future right now for this team, but willing to give Stearns his opportunity to make this team his own. I want to know, what is going to calm the masses? What move has to be made realistically? Because on X, I saw a lot of people go, oh, they got to fire Stearns. They got to fire Mendoza. They got to, Steve Cohen has to sell the team. These things are not going to happen. So what players do they have to bring in for you to feel comfortable moving into to spring training? Steele's saying Mets are waiting out the market. No one should panic, at least at this point in time, right? That I feel exactly the same way. It should be, let's see what this team looks like at spring training. Jeff Cohen saying turn Marcus Stroman into a reliever. No, thank you. Pass. We are passing on that. Peter's saying there are a lot of options out there, but the Mets want to want it at their price, which is 100% true. And especially since mentioned earlier that none of these guys have signed, they're going to wait it out. But the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking on this team. John Rossi in the chat saying they need 2 outfielders. They have Taylor and Soto. We don't know if Benj is 100% lock. He's still a prospect, which I agree. I want 2 outfielders. I don't want to have to count on Benj. Maybe it's one top outfielder and then a guy like a Harrison Bader that they bring in. Or would you prefer it being Taylor? Christopher Cancel says, I don't want to go internal. It's not the answer for a win now year. Here's the problem. If you think the Mets are in win now mode, that's all well and good. But win now to go where? They're not better than the Dodgers. They're not better than the Phillies. Heck, they might not even be better than the Braves or the Marlins at this point in time. There are a lot of teams the Padres are better than them. Milwaukee. They have not done enough yet for me to be like, I'm all in, throwing the chips on everybody. As much as I want to win the World Series this year, it's just reality that this team at this moment in time, and we still have time to get to spring training, and maybe that changes. But it doesn't seem like they're in that win now mode. So, Frankie, thank you for putting it. Pool money is affected if you sign a free agent that has a qualifying offer attached to them. So that's what we were talking about. Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez. That's the whole thing there. Gerald Carroll, shout out to you. Thank you for being a part of the chat. The entire league is waiting out the players market. It's not exclusive to Stearns only. I don't think he's thrilled with this free agency group. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he's too thrilled. We haven't seen too many links. There hasn't been too many leaks from the Mets. There really is not that many leaks anymore. We usually find out like they're signing someone that we haven't heard of or we weren't thinking about. So that's exactly, I agree there. Christopher Cancel saying, for two think Carson Bench is ready. You're wrong. He's light years away. He's not ready yet. I don't know if he's ready. I don't want to count on him being ready, especially during a year like this. It's really tough on what this team is going to do. Tony in the chat saying, yeah, I believe you, Chris, when all of baseball says he is ready now. Okay, so we have a disagreement on what we think Carson Bench is ready or not. It all depends on what happens in spring. If he lights up spring like Pete Alonso did, then he's going to get the opportunity to play in the outfield. If he doesn't, he's going to AAA. And the Mets will deal with Soto and Tyrone Taylor, and they'll sign someone for the outfield, whether it is Cal Tucker or Cody Bellinger or even a guy like Austin Hayes, which was mentioned by John Heyman. So we'll see. Jeff Cohen saying owners are waiting out the market. That is negotiations thanks to Boris, and that's what's pretty much we've been talking about. It's a wait and see market right now. I can't stand it. If you love the NBA, if you love the NHL, free agency is fast and moving within a day or two. But in baseball, they drag it out. And the fact that it's called the hot stove changed that. Always Froza saying Mets have highly touted prospects at almost every position. They will not block them long term. And that's a part of the reason why he wants these short-term deals. Maybe he'll give high AAV, but he wants short-term deal. Mainly Mets saying Stearns is getting the job done this offseason. He is punting on 26 and lockout of 27, hopefully to sign Tariq Skubal or Peralta in free agency next year. But will he be able to sign them if there's a lockout? Maybe, I guess, before they go to the lockout, which I just think is in December, it would be the end. So, yeah, there's a lot of talk on what the moves are that need to be made by the Mets this year and what David Stearns' plan is. What is David Stearns' plan? Does he have to tell us what his plan is? Like Mike Puma of the New York Post saying, no, he doesn't necessarily have to tell us 100% what his plan is going to be. Would you tell the media and the news and get out there what your plan is for whatever big project you're working on that might get interrupted by other teams and other ownerships? I wouldn't. He doesn't have to tell us the plan verbatim, but he has hinted at it. Right? Whether you were listening to him or not, during his press conference at the end of the season, he told us what he was looking for and what he wanted to fix. Same thing at the GM meetings, at the winter meetings. Run prevention, defense. He wants his players to be versatile. Example, Jorge Polanco. He wants the young players to get their opportunity. Looking at the young starting pitchers in McLean and Sproat and Tong. There's other ones that are on the rise too. You talk to Ernest Dove of the Mets Dove Report. He's been on this show many times and talks about all the pitchers that are coming up and the young players. Joe DeMayo as well, who's also been a part of this show. They have a good grasp of the prospects and who's close and who's near. And some of the guys that were being mentioned heavily, we mentioned Carson Bench, even Brett Baty, who's really hasn't really played a full season yet. And last year, he finally came into his own at third base. We'll see if he can, avoid a terrible slump this season, because he has yet to be able to do that. So Stearns has really told us what he wants to do with this team. And we know what we need. You mentioned it in the chat. I've mentioned it. Impact starting pitcher, outfielder, first baseman, at least 2 bats, and they could use another reliever for the bullpen. So whether we like it or not, whether we want to believe it or not, David Stearns has a plan. He's told us of this plan already at the end of the 2025 season presser and at the GM meetings and at the winter meetings. The thing is now, And this is where you can, have your frustrations, is how he executes this plan. I'm personally good with the Nimmo for Simeon trade. I love Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo is one of my favorite players. A lot of you know that already. But Nimmo had to go. Could they have gotten something better? Maybe. But this was more trying to get run prevention and defense, because Nimmo's not a good outfielder. He's not a good left fielder. He can't play center field anymore, which he was signed for. And that contract is an albatross. Unless he's going to become a DH, he is not making it that whole contract as an outfielder. We saw his body starting to deteriorate last season, and even into the postseason of 2024 started falling apart. They had to move Nimmo. That was the one move they had to do. Now, letting Edwin Diaz go, that's frustrating to me. Letting Pete Alonso go, also frustrating to me. Those were the two guys I would be keeping. You told me they'd get rid of Brand. If they would have kept Diaz and Alonso, figured out a way to keep them, and they traded Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil, I think Mets fans would feel a little bit better about the direction of this team. But right now, there's a lot of frustrations because, one, this team's not complete, and two, a lot of fan favorites are gone. But that is the business. Now, bringing in Devin Williams and Luke Weaver for the bullpen is good. Do they replace Edwin Diaz's production? They don't. Edwin Diaz is the best reliever in baseball. He's the best closer in baseball. But guess who's had the best 4 or 5 year span outside of 2 or 3 months as a Yankee? It's been Devin Williams. Maybe he was shaken a little bit by what happened in the postseason against Pete Alonso. He's still a good reliever and a good closer. Luke Weaver has been a good reliever for the Yankees. He's closed a little bit. Once Edwin Diaz signs elsewhere, you can't just do nothing. They had to make moves. And these guys were the best on the market. Now, could they have added a Robert Suarez or a Raisel Iglesias? Could they have added those guys? I really wanted them to bring back Tyler Rogers, but that wasn't in the cards. He got a lot of money. Jorge Polanco, he replaces Nimmo's offensive production and McNeil's versatility. Now, I don't get him starting at first base. I don't understand that when you preach run prevention and the guy hasn't played first base at all outside of one at bat. I think that's even a stretch for Stearns' ego, which him and Steve will probably gloat if that move works, right? If Jorge Polanco becomes a really good first baseman, that at least Steve Cohen's going to gloat about it. Just weird how that would fit into run prevention when he's had little to no production at first base. So the questions now become, who is Stearns going to budge on to go the extra mile in free agency? We talked about it. Doesn't like long-term deals. Prefers short-term. He'll do high AAV, but wants short-term deals. And if that's the case, we're probably going to have to wait this out, even possibly through the beginning of spring training. It's just how it is. You think about how much the WBC and the looming lockout impact the decision-making process, and maybe the WBC is not that important. But after what happened to Edwin Diaz and the Mets a few years ago after he signed that big deal, that's got to be at least in the back of David Stearns' mind and Steve Cohen's, since he was the owner. What did Buck Showalter say? I think it was on Foul Territory or one of the podcasts as he was on, that once Edwin Diaz got hurt, that changed the trajectory of the entire team. which is weird because they had David Robertson. He was a pretty good closer for the Mets. I do like a couple of quotes from Will Salmon and Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic talking about, the Mets hold interest in adding a right-handed batter to balance out their lineup. People familiar with the conversation have told them that could end up being someone who can also play first base. Don't be shocked if you see Paul Goldschmidt in a Mets uniform. Don't be shocked. He's not the final bat that should be signed, but I wouldn't be shocked. The club also needs to make a decision on whether such a player is better than Mark Vientos. Paul Goldschmidt is, 38, 39 years old right now? He is 38 years old. So would you rather have a Paul Goldschmidt at first base with Jorge Polanco trying to learn and Mark Vientos somewhere else? A DH maybe? Doesn't excite me, but at this point in time, the Mets need to fill some spaces. He also said Alex Bregman and Bo Bichette are the best right-handed batting free agents, but will likely command more years than the Mets want to tolerate. So it seems like another free agency year, unless it's a what do you call generational talent, which they thought Yamamoto was and Soto is. They ain't giving out big long-term deals. So this is where we are at right now with David Stearns, with this Mets team. Now, I'm not going to destroy David Stearns right now. I need to see what this team looks like. One, at the start of spring training, and two, after the WBC's over and we start really dwindling down on these roster spots. But I will say this season is 100% on David Stearns. If they fail to make the postseason, which I'm saying there's no excuse, they need to make the postseason, then David Stearns has failed the organization, Steve Cohen, the fan base. It will all be on him. Now, I don't know if they're going to fire him if he fails, because this is a guy that Steve Cohen has wanted forever since becoming owner. But it's not going to look good for David Stearns. And the pressure will continue to mount. The anger, the frustration from the fan base will continue to mount. And, Stearns is going to hear it. Cohen's going to hear it. You'll see it probably be affected at Citi Field if fans are not coming to the stadium. It may take a couple of years to fully replace the core pieces here, especially if they want to do it from within. Mark Vientos has given us glimpses, but he's probably not going to be a core player. Francisco Alvarez can't stay healthy. Brett Beatty is not consistent. Right now, it's Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto's team. And the hope that some of these youngsters can step up to the plate. That's the hope. Let me get to some of the comments here because there are a ton. And I appreciate you all for being a part of the chat. Let's go from the bottom here because, wow, I talked a lot and I see that there's a lot of chat here. Joshua, likes Graham Cracker, says, I'm high on Reimer, looking forward to seeing him in the future. I've heard a lot about Jacob Reimer. I think he plays third base and maybe a little bit of first base. So he's a bat that we'll definitely see at some point. I don't know if it's this year, probably either next year or after the lockout. We'll definitely see him. So also talking about trading for a guy like Christian Walker. That could be a good move for the Mets to make if you don't want a guy like Paul Goldschmidt. Christian Walker could be that guy. And he's young, as Armand is saying, only 34, 35 years old, younger than a 38-year-old Paul Goldschmidt. Rosie K saying, how is that lineup going to be competitive with Goldschmidt? I don't know. If they just add Goldschmidt, it's probably not going to be as competitive as anyone would think, as David Stearns thinks it is. Jerome Rivera is saying run prevention is also strikeout pitching or soft contact pitching along with defense. Talking like, I guess the soft contact pitching, kind of like Clay Holmes is able to get ground out, but they need the defense behind them to do that. Mainly Mets saying Goldschmidt is a negative defender and not a good offensive player at this point in his career. Don't understand the logic there. I all I've seen is the Mets being linked. I don't know. I just don't know. And Paul Goldschmidt isn't better than Mark Vientos, but also Mark Vientos, man. I hope he can turn it around and get himself going. I had talked about him going into that slump last season. People said it couldn't happen, and then there we were. I'd stick with Vientos over bringing and wasting money on a guy like Paul Goldschmidt. But we just don't know where David Stearns' mindset is as signing these guys. Is he just going to settle for a guy like that? Who knows? A lot of talk about Pete Alonso, but I'm sorry, guys. Pete Alonso is gone, and I'm moving on from him. Steele saying, I think Tucker ends up with the Mets high AEV over 4 years with a ton of opt-outs. What team gives him 8 years? He's in probably a similar situation right now as Pete Alonso. Nobody wants to sign these guys. Otherwise, he'd be signed already, I think. But all these teams are going to wait it out. All these teams are going to just wait out these signings. Good point by non-engineering. Before the homer off of Williams, everyone wanted Pete gone. Yeah, that Pete. If Pete Alonso doesn't hit that home run, he's probably gone last season. But he hits the home run. Then there's that whole thing that happened at the Mets Fan Fest or the Amazing Day, where the fans revolted against David Stearns and Steve Cohen, and I'm pretty sure they didn't like that, and they took offense to that. They signed him, but definitely affected them this offseason. We could possibly, as Jeff Cohen's saying, we could possibly seeing more of these guys in the trade market. We've seen the Mets linked to, what was it, the Padres? That's the only trade that I've seen them linked to is possibly going after the Padres relievers, and was it Ramon Liriano, who I talked about on the show not too long ago. And I usually trust what comes from Will Salmon. He's been on point this offseason more than any of these other writers and media credentialed people. So even the big names out there, Will Salmon has been on point. On point. My guy, Hector Blunt Thoughts, make sure you follow him on YouTube. He has his show. I don't know if you're doing one tonight, but he's got his show out there, Blunt Thoughts. Make sure you're following that on YouTube. Saying, are you ready for Manuel Margot in left field? I no. As you know what? As much as I was ready for Jose Siri in the outfield, that's how ready I am for him. All right, looking at some more of these chat here. A lot of talk on Pete Alonso. But here you go. Mainly Mets saying David Stearns has a plan, lower payroll, fill in some players at less money and less production than we had, let kids play, punt on 26 and 27, and then go for it in 28 and beyond. But what makes the Mets going to be enticing to come to play for if they punt in 26 and 27? Because now we're talking about overpaying for players to come here. And David Stearns is not about that. Joshua likes Graham Carver saying Simeon for Nimmo is great. Nimmo's value is about to drop so much in the next year or two, which I tend to agree with. I think that Nimmo's production, because of his body, I think Nimmo's a good player, but the fact that his body is starting to deteriorate, I think that's going to have effect on him. So to stop that, I think the Rangers are going to have to put him at DH, which what the Mets would have had to done. And me and Hector talked about this on X last night. Because I think that some of the keys that are being ignored is how much Stearns and the front office believe in the prospects waiting in the wings. Talk about Benj. I don't consider Beatty a prospect, but him putting faith in Beatty. Unless they're going to trade these prospects, they're still on this team, and it's going to be hard to block these guys with long-term contracts. So maybe they do get one outfielder like a Tucker or even Bellinger so that they leave open center field. Or what? Do they sign, a Bader to a lesser deal? This has been such a confusing offseason for this team. This is the most confused I've been about an offseason. Even with what we've talked about with David Stearns and his plan. I'm confused about the execution and how it's going to be done. It's just confusing. Wow, so many people on the chat. Appreciate you all. It's hard for me when I'm doing this by myself to get every single comment on here because there are so many comments right now. But know that I see you and I appreciate you, and I'm going to do my best. Blade Solar saying, yes, we must overpay if we want to compete. It's the cost of doing business. If Pobo don't like it, he's not the right man for the market. Who are you going to overpay for, though? That's the thing. And also, are you willing to give up, draft picks for some of these guys? Like, do you prefer Framber Valdez, or would you prefer to wait out a Tariq Skubal? That's what it comes down to. I think hitting wise right now, you could probably sign one of these Kyle Tuckers, Cody Bellinger types. But pitching wise is where you have to be very careful who you're overpaying for. Because there's always injuries. There's always Tommy John surgeries. And these pitchers rarely live out the end of their deals, ever. Always Frozen saying Stearns will only overpay for elite players. Money talks. Tucker is almost elite, top 15 players. So let's see if he gives Tucker. Maybe Tucker falls into his lap to the deal that he wants, so he doesn't have to give him an overpriced deal. Or maybe he's like, this is the guy we're going to spend on. And Cohen agrees. Russell Rivera is saying, trust the process for the future for David Stearns, like how the Dodgers became the Dodgers. And I even talked about this on Hector's podcast, Blunt Thoughts. Talked about how, the Dodgers, who the Mets want to be the East Coast Dodgers. That's all the East Coast Dodgers. Well, the Mets, the Dodgers, did not start off so well, especially with Andrew Friedman. The fans wanted him fired after year 2. And look at how far he's come. They've got 3 world championships. 2, I guess, are the most legit, right? I don't know how much you count 2020. But they had a process, and it took them close to a decade to get this perfect. Yeah, like Tony X saying, everyone forgets the 08 to 14 Dodgers, in the 2019. They even went to a couple World Series. What was it, 2017, 2018? I know they lost to Boston and they lost to Houston in the World Series. Blades Solar is saying to wait out for Scuba Peralta, punt 2025. Let's see what our kids have. Joshua likes Graham Crowder saying getting an ace is much harder than people realize. Max Fried's contract is terrible, and Cole is dealing with injuries. As you can see, Dodgers are the Dodgers they've been setting up for a long time. And they're able to interchange players, ad nauseum, right? Like they're always interchanging players. And that's kind of where you want to get this team to be. They're just not there right now. Right now, the whole thing is to get this team into the postseason this year and replicate that next year. And hope for the best because, obviously one team wins the World Series. They need to get a starter. Maureen's saying right now our rotation consists of a bunch of number 3 starters at best. A bunch of number 3s for sure. As we mentioned earlier, the Sengas, who has number 2 type potential. Nolan McLean's probably number 2. Those are probably your 2 number 2s, right? Nolan McLean, who has the potential to be an ace. Kodai Senga is probably best at number 2, and sometimes he can give you number 1 stuff, but he's never healthy. And there's always an issue of him preparing to pitch for this team. So a lot of things got to go his way. And then you got the Manayas and the Petersons of the world at Sprouts and Tongs that will fill out the rest of the rotation. Carl Shatis saying the way to become the East Coast Dodgers is to bring the Dodgers back to New York. Probably the best way to put it. Definitely the best way to put it. I want to quickly talk about this trade with the Athletics that brought that sent Jeff McNeil on out of here. He got traded for pitching prospect Yordan Rodriguez. Mets also sent $5.75 million to knock the contract down to $10 million. And we know McNeil became expendable once Polanco was put on this team, and Simeon as well. They didn't need him for the infield anymore. He was just going to be in the outfield. Rosenthal and Salmon said that this was more of a roster reconstruction more than payroll restructuring. So McNeil, 2025 last season, 243 batting average, 12 homers, 54 RBIs, and a 746 OPS. His career as a New York Met, 284 batting average, 80 homers, 367 RBIs, and a 779 OPS. 2-time All-Star in 2019 and 2022, where he also won the batting title in 2022. Now, Rodriguez is only 17 years old, signed right out of Cuba. In 15 1/3 innings pitched, 20 strikeouts, 8 walks, and 5 runs. So the Mets, there's only so much you can talk about because it's been talked about enough already about what this Mets team is doing. And as Pablo's saying, nobody's going to miss Jeff McNeil. It was time to move on. He was not the same player post-2022, in which they had signed that big 4-year deal with him. Everyone's out. Good riddance to Jeff McNeil. I mean, when he was good, he was good. But time to move on. Time to try somebody new out there and move on from these players that really did not win with this team. So, look, it's hard to come on and do a show with not much going on in the offseason, but I appreciate the fact that we have 284 people on this Sunday, which I think is the final NFL Sunday. This is the first year that I have not followed the NFL. I have not watched one single game. But the fact that you're here with me as we get closer to spring training, and the Mets really have not done much this offseason outside of bringing in Devin Williams and Luke Weaver. Yeah, as Blade says, they're a passionate bunch. Absolutely. But we were waiting for this team to make a move and give us some semblance of hope into what the future is. They have the number 1 or at least top 5 farm system, according to ESPN. Number 1 farm system in all of baseball, which is something to hang your hat on. But as we've noticed, not a lot of these prospects translate to the major leagues, and some take longer than others. And we know it's, as Met fans, it's very hard to be patient and wait, considering this team hasn't won the World Series in over 40, 50 years now. That's what we want. We want to see a championship here in Queens. And that's what we hope David Stearns is building. Because he's not going anywhere right now. So everybody that wants him fired, everyone that wants him to go and leave, everyone that wants Steve Cohen to trade the team, everyone that wants Carlos Mendoza out of here, it's not happening. Not happening. At the very least, the move that's going to happen if this team fails this season, it's probably going to be Carlos Mendoza not being retained. This is the final year of his contract. He's probably going to go. But like as Blade's saying, like I see everyone getting frustrated on social media. And I'm not going to tell you how to fan. I'm not going to tell you you're right. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. We may disagree, and that's the whole point of us having conversations here. We can agree to disagree. But everyone getting on each other on social media about this team, like as Blade put, there's no choice but to wait. There's no choice but to wait. Yeah. And a lot of the media, and you talk about Puma, and there's others as well. I don't want to just single Puma out, but he's been kind of front and center. There's a lot of trolling and a lot of articles that are being put out about, players' politics, which I'm never going to get into that here. I'm never going to talk about that here. I don't care about what, Francisco Lindor and his wife do politically, and what Brandon Nimmo does politically, and what Cohen does. But that's not what we're doing here. I want to talk about how to improve this team, because the reason why this team stunk last year is because their star players underachieved and their pitching was atrocious. That's why they stunk. Forget the clubhouse nonsense. I mean, look at how rowdy the 86 clubhouse was, and that team won a World Series. It's not always sunshine and rainbows in a clubhouse with players that you're going to be with 162 days of a season. This team stunk because their stars underachieved, and most of them now are gone and been replaced. Well, not fully replaced, but they will be replaced. So we just have to go with it. As much as a lot of people are going to hate it, just got to go with it for now. And if the team's not doing well, obviously fans are not going to show up. There's going to be other things to do. The summer is going to bring, the NHL postseason playoffs, the NBA playoffs. There's a lot of things to do than to 100% be all in on what the Mets are. I'm going to be here to bring the content, the best content that I could possibly bring you. And hopefully you're here along for the ride as well. And as my guy Hector put, David Stearns has a chance to make this a very different team. There's so much money out there to spend now with these players gone, and there's so much ambition that the Mets have to win. I agree. Well, that's going to wrap up Subway to Shea for today. Again, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, for being a part of the chat. I love the chat not only because I get to delve in and talk with you guys, but you guys are also chatting with each other, which makes this a community here that we got going. And the fact that I can't get to every single comment in the chat. Look, we got over 300 people in the room. I simply just can't do it all. It's a little easier when we have a guest, because I can, filter through a lot of the comments and put you on. But it's kind of hard right now. It's kind of a little hard right now to do that. But shout out to every single one of you that are in here. Shout out to every single one of you that have been a part of Subway to Shea for now 230 episodes since 2020. And we continue to grow. Because of you, this channel continues to grow. We went from just being an audio podcast to now being on YouTube, which has been so much fun for me. We have done special events like the Queens Baseball Convention, being part of panels, like the Doc Gooden interview that I got to do live. That's all because you guys are very supportive of my work and what I've been doing. It's a lot of hard work. I do this by myself. It's not easy. If you're a content creator, you know how hard it is to put together a live show, especially right now on a day like this where nothing is going on. And we have to figure out things to talk about and hypothesize and dream of what this Mets team could be and what they could do. It's not easy. Cutting clips, getting them out there on social media so that we could bring in more people to the conversation. If you know people that love the Mets and you enjoy this show, not only subscribe, but share with others. Let them know they come in here. And we may agree, we may disagree. But your opinion is always valued here on this show, no matter what. As long as you keep it clean, as long as you keep it respectful, this show will be here for you, whether you're happy about this team, whether you're upset, whether you're frustrated, whether you're fired up, it'll be here. So that pretty much wraps up what we got going here. Like I said before, you can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea, always throwing, some comments out there. We'll post some videos from the shows. It's all out there on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera 86. If you want to listen to the show, which will be up later on tonight, you can do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify by subscribing and following there. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be a part of the conversation, you want to be a part of the Subway to Shea community, you're doing that right here on YouTube. And you can support the show on YouTube with super chat, super stickers, and super thanks. Appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for being a part of the Subway to Shea podcast. This is always a tough time to do. The offseason can be a lot of fun because I know the season drags on. The offseason can be a lot of fun, but also there are moments like this where it's just very slow. And we're trying to think of things that we can talk about here. But there'll be a lot more coming from me as this offseason continues. We're hoping that the Mets make some moves as we get through what is the doldrums of this hot stove, or what I like to call the cold stove, and get into spring training, which is weeks away, folks. We are weeks away from spring training. We are weeks away from the WBC. I'm going to try to cover a little bit of that as well this offseason as we head to opening day for the New York Mets. But that wraps up the Subway to Shea podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Always remember, let's go Mets.